Welcome to the Common Man Football Show. My name is James Coburn, and today's episode, we're talking about the Chicago Bears 2019 NFL Draft Class based on analytics. And if you're new to the show, new to the work that I do, all terms and definitions will be in the description. On top of all of that information, if you want to look at the previous draft classes for the Chicago Bears, the 2018 draft class and of course the 2017 draft class, I will have a link in the description for all those previous reviews, because I do know that every year people go, well, what about your previous, the reports and stuff? And it's like, okay, I mean, I post all this stuff a lot, but let me just put a link there so you can check it out yourself. And again, data is not a complete science, but it is something where, again, it gives you an idea of how to learn from the draft. It gives you an idea of how to improve in the draft, and also gives you an idea of the statistical chances of these players making it at the next level. You know, who has a higher chance of another one. Sometimes that statistical chance is the difference between a player having a 20% chance of becoming a successful player and a 1% chance of a player becoming successful. But still, I would rather bet on the 20% guy than the 1% guy. So, with all that out of the way, let's get to the data. So, the first pick of the draft for the Bears, of course, was David Montgomery, running back out of Iowa State. Production-wise, 71.88 in terms of his market share production score. Pretty much hit the 5-time Pro Bowl area and above the 3-time Pro Bowl area. When you look at the averages, he's closer to the Pro Bowl and starter average than the All-Pro average. Definitely a little bit below average, but definitely has a chance to become a starter Pro Bowler. His issue is athleticism data. Did not test that well as an athlete. 42.83 in terms of explosion, 55.95 in terms of speed. And the problem with this is that every single multiple All-Pro and Pro Bowl running back since 1999, with the exception of one running back, which was Arian Foster, had at least a 79 or higher athleticism score, whether that was explosiveness, speed, or flexibility. So the issue is that David Montgomery's athleticism does not match up with the athleticism of All-Pro and Pro Bowl players, which is a concern. He has good production, but does not have great athleticism. So it's going to be interesting to see how he exactly turns out. I do think he has a chance to become a starter, but this is a team that also already has running backs on it. So he's most likely going to be sort of a running back by committee type in many ways. And then, of course, we get to Ridley, wide receiver out of Georgia. When you look at his production traits, he had a 27.35 passing yards market share production score. Did not hit the 5-time All-Pro, 3-time All-Pro, 3-time Pro Bowl, or long-term starter area. When you look at the averages at the position, well below what the averages are for All-Pro, Pro Bowl, and starter player based on his market share production. And in terms of his MSA rating, which is essentially his production for his level of competition and his age, he only had a 51.65. So it's a very low chance that Ridley ever becomes an All-Pro or Pro Bowl player. His production doesn't hit where it needs to hit. His production for his strength of schedule does not hit where it needs to hit. And then you get into his athleticism traits, 25.51 in terms of explosiveness, 29.95 in terms of speed, and 22.47 in terms of flexibility for his size. Does not have a 54 or higher athleticism score, which the vast majority of All-Pro and Pro Bowl wide receivers had at least one above average athleticism score. When you look at the averages for All-Pro, Pro Bowl, and starter player, nowhere near the averages for any sort of high-quality outcome or even starter outcome at the position. So bottom line, Ridley is a unproductive and unathletic wide receiver. Will he become successful? He would have to be a incredibly historical outlier for that to happen. It hasn't happened. There definitely are wide receivers that were not athletic that went on to become successful, but they were productive. Chad Johnson was not the most athletic wide receiver coming out, but he was very productive at Oregon State. Jarvis Landry was not the most athletic wide receiver coming out of LSU, but he was really productive coming out of LSU. Ridley is not productive and not athletic. So there's a very low chance that he becomes a successful player at the NFL. And he may do well in preseason. He may have a little thing here and there, but I would say it's very unlikely that he becomes a consistently successful wide receiver in the NFL. And of course, we get to Duke Shelley, cornerback out of Kansas State. 75.68 in terms of his solo tackle score, and 78.73 in terms of pass deflection. So his good production pretty much hits above the thresholds and, of course, above the averages at the position for All-Pro and Pro Bowl player. But his problem, honestly, is with size and athleticism. He is 5'8", 173 pounds. Doesn't really have the best length. And in terms of athleticism traits, 8.59 in terms of explosiveness, 28.62 in terms of speed, and about a 25.09 flexibility score. Doesn't hit the All-Pro threshold, Pro Bowl threshold. Does not hit the starter threshold for explosiveness either. And I think the best case for Duke Shelley is that he becomes sort of a special teams guy to slot corner. But his athleticism is definitely very concerning in terms of long-term success because he's nowhere near the starter averages, Pro Bowl averages, or All-Pro averages for a cornerback. Then, of course, we get to Careth White, Jr. from Florida Atlantic. When you look at his production, 31.52, so does not hit the high-quality outcomes at the position in terms of his production. When you look at the averages, nowhere near above the averages or near the averages for a starter, All-Pro, and Pro Bowl player. But he does have good athleticism traits, 87.30 in terms of explosiveness, 80.40 in terms of speed, 29.12 in terms of flexibility for his size. So he's essentially a very explosive, a very fast running back who just wasn't very productive at Florida Atlantic. I think this is someone who's most likely going to be a rotational player, someone who, kind of adds a sort of a backup, gives a little bit of oomph, and, in terms of speed and explosiveness when he does get onto the field, but not someone that is going to be a consistent long-term starter for the Bears. So kind of a pick that was drafted to be a backup. He's basically someone who has a backup profile that was drafted to be a backup. And as you know, a lot of times I seem very hypercritical about this, but I feel like if you're drafting players in day 3, you need to be taking chances on players that have the best shot to become a long-term starter, to be more valuable than just a backup. And I do not like the sort of approach of most teams to just draft backups in these rounds, only because I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to add competition. I'm trying to do these types of things so that I have an abundance of starters versus a starter, then you get injured, and then the backup comes in, and then there's nothing we can do because the backup is just not as good as the starter. Like, it's a huge drop-off between that two. And the best example is when you have a quarterback who's like a star quarterback, and then the backup comes in, and the backup is just terrible. You don't want to be in that situation. So it's never great to lose your star running back, your star wide receiver, your star tight end, but it's also even worse when you replace your star running back or tight end or wide receiver with someone who is considerably less than what you had at the position. And then the last player to talk about, of course, is Steven Denmark out of Valdosta State, a cornerback. I'm not quite sure if he is a cornerback, though. He's 220 pounds based on his pro day data, which sounds more like a safety to me, but let's get to his athleticism traits anyways. The main thing I have on him is athleticism. He had a 99.99 explosion score, 96.38 speed score, and a 54.97 flexibility score. So he's very explosive, very fast, but not very flexible. And I would say based on his size and his other sort of characteristics, I would not be surprised if they try him out at safety, at strong safety in particular. Because most strong safeties are 220 plus pounds, and they usually are very explosive, very fast, but not very flexible. That's kind of what he looks like to me on paper, is more of a safety, like a strong safety type, than a cornerback. But we'll see. But he is someone who has great length, great size, great explosiveness, great speed, but just is not the best or most balanced player in terms of his overall data. So overall, looking at the Chicago Bears draft class, I would say it's okay. It has a lot of players that have good production, but also players who don't have good production. And honestly, there's just not a player that I can look at and just hang my hat on and say that this guy is guaranteed to be successful. So they took a lot of players with low statistical chance of success. I would say the player who probably has the best chance to at least become something significant is probably David Montgomery, just because of how high he was drafted. But the rest of the players in this draft, I just don't know how they're going to work out long term. Because I think there's a lot of players that are just not athletic, they're not productive, and it just it's just a big question mark on this draft. So I don't think this is the draft that's really going to pan out the best for the Bears. And I think a lot of these guys will either be off of the team in 4 years or just be sort of career backup players in the long run. And of course, my name is James Coburn. You can find my other work at draftcoburn.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Geometrics. And if you like this content and you want more content like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Share this video as well with anybody that you know. Hit that notification bell in case you want to be reminded when another video of mine drops. And also become a super fan by joining my Patreon page today. A $5 donation a month helps me out tremendously in terms of data and other work. So definitely go do that as well. And with all that out of the way, thank you very much, and I'll talk to you guys in the next show. Peace.